In a world choked by the pale rot, a fungal pandemic that turned the air itself into a poison, 10-year-old Dinah Miller is an impossible sight. Every morning, she walks her 6 massive German shepherds, Titan, Rex, Ghost, Baron, Sarge, and Jinx, through the ash-covered ruins of Chicago without a gas mask. While the few remaining underground survivors assume she is a ghost or a mutation, the truth is far more scientific. Before I continue this story, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another fascinating story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Dinah is the daughter of the world's leading virologist, and her dogs are not just pets. They are mobile, living filtration units. The unbelievable secret is that the dog's blood contains a synthesized, self-replicating enzyme that purifies the air around them. Dinah isn't just walking them for exercise. She is maintaining the only mobile clean air bubble left on Earth, protecting the prototype serum in her own veins that represents humanity's last hope for a cure. The morning spores hung low over the rusted remains of Michigan Avenue as they emerged from the toxic haze. 6 massive German shepherds moved with military precision, their muscular bodies tensed in perfect synchronization, glowing amber eyes alert and focused forward. No gas masks, no oxygen tanks, just raw power in motion commanded by someone through the deadly silence. The starving survivors hiding in the shadows of broken skyscrapers strained to see who controlled these magnificent beasts through the pale rot. Then, gasps rippled through the onlookers. It wasn't a hazmat-suited soldier or a hardened scavenger guiding this formidable pack. It was a child, a tiny slip of a girl in a vibrant pink double-breasted coat. Her delicate frame seemed impossibly small next to the powerful animals, yet they flanked her protectively, responding to commands so subtle they were nearly invisible. "Something's not right about that," muttered a scavenger from the Iron Lung Brigade, narrowing his eyes as he watched the miracle through a cracked visor. "No human can breathe that soup and live. Mark my words. Those dogs are carrying something more valuable than gold." Little did they know that their desperation would unleash a chain of events that would expose a secret more extraordinary than anyone left in the ruins of Chicago could have imagined. Dinah Miller wasn't always the airwalker who commanded German shepherds through the end of the world. Born to Dr. Arthur Miller, the renowned virologist who first identified the pale rot, Dinah's early years were spent in high-tech labs where dogs were part of the research team. Her father recognized Dinah's unique biological compatibility when, as the world began to choke, she remained unaffected. Behind the reinforced steel doors of the Miller laboratory, a remarkable and dangerous relationship had developed. Beneath the reinforced concrete of the Chicago Medical District, the air smelled of ozone and sterile plastic, a stark contrast to the thick fungal soup of the pale rot waiting above. Dinah Miller moved through the dim laboratory with the quiet efficiency of a soldier, though she was barely 10 years old. Her pink double-breasted coat hung on a sterilized hook near the airlock, a splash of defiant color in a world turned gray. Every morning began with the same ritual, the checking of the guardians. "Titan Center," Dinah whispered. Her voice was small but carried an absolute authority that didn't require volume. A massive German shepherd, his fur thick and dark, padded forward. He didn't wag his tail. His movements were heavy, rhythmic, and purposeful. Dinah reached for his specialized harness, a complex web of sensors and filtration canisters that hummed with a faint blue light. These weren't just leather straps. They were life support. She checked the seal on the primary intake valve near his neck, ensuring the synthesized enzyme, the very thing her father had died perfecting, was circulating correctly through the dog's bloodstream. One by one, the others followed. Rex, Ghost, Baron, Sarge, and finally Jinx, the smallest of the pack. As Dinah tightened the buckles and calibrated the oxygen output levels on their collars, she felt the low vibration of their mechanical components working in tandem with their biological hearts. These dogs were mobile, living filtration units, their bodies repurposed into an impenetrable shield against the spores. "Blood oxygen check," she murmured to the empty room, as if her father were still there with a clipboard, marking her progress. She pressed her thumb against a biometric scanner on the main console. The screen flickered to life, bathing her face in a clinical glow. 99%. The prototype serum in her veins was holding, but she knew the limit. Without the dogs to scrub the air around her, the sheer density of the pale rot in the ruins above would overwhelm her internal defenses in minutes. She pulled on her pink coat, the fabric thick and treated with antifungal sealant. It was the last thing her father had given her, a piece of her old life to wear into the new one. She checked the power levels on her handheld navigator, the siren array glowing as a distant, lonely waypoint on the digital map. "Baron, Sarge, flank," she commanded. The dogs shifted, forming a perfect hexagonal perimeter around her. The air inside this small circle was crisp and clean, purified by the invisible bubble the pack generated. Dinah gripped the reinforced leashes, not because she needed to lead them, but because the physical connection was the only thing that kept her grounded. She stepped into the airlock. The heavy steel door hissed shut behind her, sealing away the safety of the lab. A second door stood before her, the only thing separating her from the ash-covered tomb of Chicago. She adjusted the collar on Jinx, patted Titan's broad head, and took a deep, steadying breath of the filtered air. "Let's go find them," she said, her voice a fragile promise in the silence. The outer door groaned open, revealing a world of milky white fog and skeletal skyscrapers. Dinah Miller stepped out into the poison, a tiny figure in a pink coat, surrounded by 6 glowing-eyed monsters, beginning her walk through the end of the world. High above the street, perched within the hollowed-out remains of a flagship department store, the air was a stagnant, yellow soup of fungal spores. Inside the gloom, 3 figures crouched, their forms obscured by bulky, patched-together pressure suits that hissed with every labored breath. These were members of the Iron Lung Brigade, men who lived and died by the integrity of their mechanical filters. Through the jagged remains of a 4th-story window, a man named Cale adjusted the focus on a set of cracked binoculars, his gloved fingers trembling slightly from the early stages of spore cough. "There," Cale rasped, his voice transmitted through a tinny external speaker on his chest. "Coming past the wreckage of the transit bus. Right on time." Below them, the airwalker emerged from the milky haze of the pale rot. Dinah Miller looked like a ghost from the old world, her pink double-breasted coat a shocking, vibrant wound against the monochromatic gray of the ruins. She moved with an eerie, rhythmic discipline, flanked by the 6 massive German shepherds that the brigade had come to fear and covet in equal measure. Through the lenses, Cale watched the dog's amber eyes catch the dim light, glowing with an unnatural internal heat. "Look at the way the fog curls away from them," whispered Jax, the youngest of the 3 lurkers. "It's like they're pushing the rot back. She isn't even wearing a mask. How is she still breathing?" "It's not her. It's the beasts," Cale replied, his eyes narrowing as he tracked the lead dog Titan. He watched the blue rhythmic pulse of the dog's collars, a light that signaled the presence of high-level filtration tech they desperately needed to trade or use before their own lungs turned to mulch. The Iron Lung Brigade's mechanical suits were failing. Their filters were clogged with the very ash they were meant to scrub, and the airwalker represented the only mobile clean air source left in the city. The plan was already in motion. The brigade didn't want the girl. She was just a slip of a thing, a biological anomaly they didn't understand, but they wanted the keys she held on those leashes. They saw the dogs as a biological resource, a living gold mine of synthesized enzymes and advanced AI that could keep 100 men breathing for a decade. If we take the smallest one, the one on the left, Jinx, it might weaken the bubble enough to make her faint, Jack suggested, reaching for a rusted tranquilizer rifle leaning against a mannequin. No, Cale snapped, his speaker crackling with authority. We don't just take one. We trap the pack. If we break the formation too early, the spores will rush in and kill the girl before we can extract the serum from her veins. She's the carrier. The dogs are the filters. We need the whole set. Dinah stopped at the intersection below, her hand rising in a subtle gesture. In perfect unison, the 6 dogs halted, their heads swiveling toward the department store as if they could sense the predatory eyes watching from above. For a heart-stopping moment, the lead dog, Titan, stared directly at the 4th-floor window, his low growl vibrating through the asphalt. She's heading for the subway entrance at Jackson, Cale noted, his breathing becoming a frantic mechanical wheeze. The tunnels will bottle them up. Signal the others at the lower levels. We take her in the dark, where the dogs can't see to fight. As Dinah and her guardians descended into the yawning black maw of the subway, the lurkers withdrew into the shadows of the store, their heavy boots thudding against the rotted carpet as they hurried toward the service stairs. The hunt had moved from observation to pursuit, and the secret Dinah Miller protected was about to be tested by the desperation of men who had forgotten what it meant to be human. The darkness of the Jackson Street subway entrance swallowed the pink of Dinah's coat as she descended into the concrete throat of the city. The air here was thicker, the pale rot pooling in the low-lying tunnels like a stagnant lake of invisible needles. As they moved deeper, the blue rhythmic hum of the dogs' collars became the only light, casting long, predatory shadows against the tiled walls. Dinah felt the shift in the air before the sensors on her belt even chirped. A first breach was coming, a localized spore storm triggered by the collapsing ventilation shafts above. The wind began to howl through the narrow tunnels, carrying a concentrated wave of the white, fuzzy death. "Tighten the circle," Dinah commanded, her voice echoing off the grime-streaked walls. Titan and Rex moved to the front, their massive chests heaving as their internal filtration units kicked into overdrive. Ghost and Baron pressed against her sides, while Sarge and Jinx anchored the rear. The cure circle shrank until Dinah could feel the warm mechanical heat radiating from the dogs' harnesses. The storm hit with a physical force. Outside the bubble, the world turned into a blinding white blizzard of spores so dense they could clog a man's throat in a single gasp. Inside, the air remained unervingly clear, though the dogs began to whine, their systems straining under the atmospheric pressure. Dinah knelt, burying her hands in Titan's fur, watching the blue lights on their collars flicker to a frantic, warning purple. From the darkness beyond the whiteout, a metallic clatter rang out, the sound of a heavy boot slipping on a rail. Dinah's head snapped up. The dogs didn't bark. They dropped into low, silent crouches, their ears pinned back. She wasn't alone in the storm. A voice, distorted by a failing mechanical diaphragm, drifted through the haze. "The bubble is shrinking. Wait for the filters to redline." Dinah realized the storm wasn't just a natural disaster. It was an opportunity for the lurkers. She gripped the leashes, her knuckles white. She had to navigate the collapsing debris of the subway tracks while the very air she breathed was trying to crush the shield her dogs provided. She began to move, a slow, blind crawl through the heart of the storm, knowing that if one dog tripped, if one harness failed, the pale rot would claim them all before the brigade even reached her. "Steady, boys," she whispered, more to herself than the pack. "Just keep breathing." The whiteout of the spore storm was so dense it felt like walking through a solid wall of cotton. Dinah pushed forward, her legs burning as she stepped over rusted tracks and rotted railroad ties. The only thing keeping her upright was the collective strength of the 6 German shepherds, their bodies acting as a physical and biological anchor in the chaos. Suddenly, a sound pierced through the howling wind, a rhythmic, wet rasping. It wasn't the mechanical hiss of the Iron Lung Brigade's suits. It was the sound of a human being drowning on dry land. Dinah slowed her pace, her heart hammering against her ribs. 10 feet ahead, slumped against a grime-covered tile pillar, sat a man. He wasn't wearing the heavy armor of a raider. He wore the tattered remnants of a civilian coat, and his gas mask lay shattered on the ground beside him. His skin was already beginning to show the telltale gray veins of the pale rot. He looked up, his eyes wide and bloodshot, as the blue light of the dog's colors illuminated his face. "Help, please," he wheezed, his hand reaching out feebly. Dinah froze. To help him, she would have to expand the cure circle. Every inch she pushed the dogs outward to encompass him would thin the concentration of the purifying enzyme. If the storm outside the bubble grew any stronger, the filtration harnesses would redline, and the dogs, her only family, could suffer permanent lung damage. She thought of her father's voice on the recordings, reminding her that her life was the only one that mattered because she was the vessel for the cure. Tighten, Baron, expand. The command left her lips before she could overthink it. The 2 lead dogs stepped outward, the blue hum of their collars rising to a high-pitched whine as they struggled to scrub the additional volume of air. The man gasped as the clean air bubble washed over him. For a moment, the wet, rattling sound in his chest eased. He stared at Dinah, then at the 6 glowing-eyed monsters protecting her, his expression shifting from terror to a dazed kind of awe. He realized he was standing in the presence of the legend, the girl who could breathe in the dead world. You're her," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The Miller girl." Dinah didn't answer. She was watching the sensors on Titan's harness. The blue light was flickering into a dangerous, strobing violet. The dogs were struggling. She knew she couldn't stay here, and she couldn't take him with her. The extra strain on the pack would kill them all within blocks. "I can't stay," Dinah said, her voice sounding strange and hollow in the clear air. She reached into her pink coat and pulled out a small, pressurized canister, a temporary breathing shot her father had designed for emergencies. She set it on the ground near him. "This will give you an hour. Find a sealed room. Go deep." As she pulled her dogs back into their tight formation, the man reached out again, not for her but toward the light. "Wait. They're right behind you. The brigade. They've been tracking the scent of the ozone. They don't want the girl, they want the blood." Dinah's blood went cold. She looked back into the white storm just as the wet rasping of the man was replaced by the sudden, sharp clack hiss of a mechanical valve. The Iron Lung Brigade hadn't been waiting for the storm to pass. They were using it as a cloak. "Run," the man whispered, just as a harpoon-like cable shot out of the mist, snagging the harness of Sarge at the rear of the pack. The peace of the morning walk was over. The hunt had officially begun. The metal cable cinched around Sarge's harness with a violent jerk, the mechanical winch of the Iron Lung Brigade screaming as it retracted. Sarge was the anchor of the rear, and as he was pulled into the swirling white void of the subway tunnel, the cure circle buckled. Dinah felt the first sharp, acidic sting of the pale rot hitting the back of her throat. "Sarge! Resist!" Dinah screamed, but her voice was muffled by the sudden roar of a dozen high-pitched, oscillating whistles. The Iron Lung Brigade had deployed their sonic flutes. The sound was a jagged, piercing frequency designed specifically to overload the dog's enhanced auditory sensors. Titan and Rex, the lead guardians, began to thrash, their amber eyes flickering between steady light and a frantic, blinded red. The military precision that had guided them through the ruins disintegrated as the dogs began to turn in circles, snapping at the air, their internal AI struggling to filter the auditory assault from their protective protocols. "Dinah Miller," a voice boomed, amplified through a suit's exterior speaker. It was Kale, emerging from the mist like a mechanical nightmare. "The dogs are suffering. Release the leashes, and we will let them live. We only want the filters." Dinah ignored him, dropping to her knees and crawling toward the retreating shadow of Sarge. The small dog was digging his claws into the cracked concrete, sparks flying from his harness as he fought the winch. Dinah reached into the hidden compartment of her pink coat and pulled out a small, handheld transmitter, a kill switch for the auditory sensors her father had installed in case of a system hijack. With a trembling finger, she jammed the button. A localized electromagnetic pulse hissed from her hand. For a split second, the sonic whistling died, replaced by a heavy, ringing silence. The dogs froze, their amber eyes glowing bright and steady once more. In that window of clarity, Sarge didn't just resist. He lunged. The massive German shepherd used the momentum of the cable to propel himself toward the dark shape of the raider holding the winch. "Kill protocol, defensive." Dinah cried out, the words tasting like ash and iron. Titan and Rex broke from the circle, charging into the whiteout. They didn't bark. They were silent, efficient shadows of fur and steel. The sound of metal teeth meeting pressurized suits echoed through the tunnel, followed by the terrified shouts of men who had underestimated the bond between the girl and her pack. The dogs were winning the fight, but their charge had left their primary objective, the girl, defenseless against the air itself. But the victory was short-lived. As the dogs moved to attack, the clean air bubble vanished. Dinah was left standing alone in the heart of the subway tunnel, the pale rot rushing into her lungs like liquid fire. She collapsed, her vision blurring as the spores began to take hold. Through the haze, she saw Titan standing over a fallen raider, his head turning back toward her, his amber eyes wide with a very human kind of panic. The dogs were winning the fight, but their charge had left their primary objective, the girl, defenseless against the air itself. The subway tunnel blurred into a nightmare of pulsing gray and violet. As the pale rot flooded Dinah's lungs, the world didn't go black. It turned a feverish electric blue. She collapsed against the cold tiles, the sound of the struggle between her dogs and the Iron Lung Brigade fading into a distant underwater hum. In the delirium of the infection, a hidden command line in her mind finally decrypted. It was a sensory memory, triggered by the exact chemical composition of the spores now attacking her cells. She saw her father's face, not in the lab, but in their final moments. He wasn't just checking her blood oxygen. He was whispering a sequence into her ear, a failsafe buried in her subconscious. "Dinah," his ghost whispered in the fever dream, "the dogs are the shield, but you are the source. The enzyme doesn't just live in their blood. It was born in yours." The unbelievable secret was far more personal than a mobile filtration bubble. Her father hadn't just made her immune. He had turned her biology into a walking catalyst. The dogs were never intended to be her permanent protectors. They were the conduits through which her own body could heal the world. A sudden, violent heat surged from the center of her chest, radiating outward to her fingertips. Outside her mind, Dinah's skin began to glow with a soft, rhythmic luminescence that mirrored the blue of the dog's collars. As she exhaled, a cloud of sapphire-colored mist escaped her lips. Where the blue mist touched the white spores of the pale rot, the fungus didn't just die, it crystallized and shattered, falling to the floor like harmless diamond dust. Titan, sensing the shift, abandoned the raider he had pinned and raced back to her side. He stood over her, his own harness reacting to the surge in Dinah's biosignature. The German shepherd began to howl, a sound that wasn't a cry of pain, but a frequency that harmonized with Dinah's internal pulse. Cale, the brigade leader, stumbled back, his mechanical visor fogging as he watched the impossible. The girl wasn't dying from the breach. She was purifying it. The very air around her was becoming a sanctuary that no suit could ever replicate. Dinah opened her eyes, which now glowed with the same amber fire as her guardian's. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the air. The secret in the blood was out. She didn't need the dogs to keep her alive. They were there to help her carry the light to the rest of the world. The blood. Cale whispered, dropping his weapon in a mix of terror and religious awe. She is the cure. The siren array stood like a jagged finger of steel pointing toward the bruised heavens, its summit lost in the swirling indigo vortex of the pale rot. Dinah Miller moved toward the base of the tower, her every step leaving a shimmering blue footprint of purified energy on the ash-covered pavement. Behind her, the 6 German shepherds moved in a protective phalanx, their amber eyes now burning with a fierce, resonant light that mirrored their mistress's internal fire. The Iron Lung Brigade had not given up. They had retreated to the upper levels of the surrounding parking structures, firing grappling lines and gas-propelled canisters to slow her advance. But Dinah didn't flinch. As she approached the tower's service entrance, she raised her hand, and the sapphire mist emanating from her skin pulsed outward, disintegrating the incoming projectiles before they could touch her pack. Titan Rex, clear the path. Dinah commanded. The 2 lead dogs surged forward, their bodies moving with a speed that defied their massive frames. They didn't just fight. They moved with a tactical intelligence that felt ancient. They bypassed the heavy barricades the brigade had erected, leaping through shattered windows to flush out the snipers. The sounds of clashing metal and retreating screams echoed down the stairwell as Dinah began her ascent. The climb was grueling. With every flight of stairs, the atmospheric pressure increased, and the concentration of the pale rot became so thick it was almost liquid. On the 40th floor, the airlock system had failed, creating a death zone where the spores were visible to the naked eye as pulsing, hungry veins of gray. One by one, the dogs began to take their positions as guardians of the ascent. "Ghost Baron, hold the landing," Dinah whispered as they reached the 50th floor. The 2 dogs peeled away from the group, planting themselves at the top of the stairs. They were the rear guard, tasked with holding back the tide of raiders following in Dinah's wake. They didn't need leashes anymore. They understood the mission. They were the gatekeepers of the new world. By the time Dinah reached the final maintenance ladder leading to the transmitter deck, only Titan remained by her side. Her pink coat was shredded and stained with ash, but the glow beneath her skin was blinding now. She could feel the siren array humming beneath her feet, a dormant giant waiting for a voice to wake it. She climbed onto the open-air platform, the wind at the summit howling with the fury of a dying planet. Below her, Chicago was a sea of white rot, but from this height, she could see the curvature of the earth and the dark, suffocating shroud that covered it. "I'm here, Dad," she whispered into the storm. Titan stood at the edge of the platform, his fur whipped by the gale, his amber eyes fixed on the horizon. He was the final shield, standing between the girl and the abyss. Dinah reached for the central interface of the array, her fingers hovering over the injection port where her father had once told her the key must be placed. She didn't have a glass vial or a synthetic serum. She only had herself. She pressed her palm against the cold steel of the transmitter, and for the first time since the world ended, Dinah Miller stopped being a survivor and became a savior. The wind at the peak of the siren array was a physical weight, a screaming wall of white and indigo that threatened to tear Dinah from the maintenance platform. Below her, the Iron Lung Brigade had breached the lower levels, their mechanical shouts lost in the gale, but Titan stood at the edge of the abyss, a silent sentinel of fur and steel, his amber eyes never leaving the stairwell door. Dinah pressed her palm against the central interface. The metal was frigid, but where her skin touched the transmitter, the steel began to glow with a fierce sapphire light. "Final exhaust protocol," Dinah whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. Suddenly, the airlock door behind her exploded. Cale stumbled onto the platform, his pressure suit tattered, his mask cracked. He raised a rusted projectile launcher, but his hands shook as he looked at the girl. She wasn't just a child anymore. She was the epicenter of a blue sun. "Don't do it," Cale screamed through his chest speaker. "The output will burn you out. If you give it all to the machine, there's nothing left for you. You'll die in the rot just like the rest of us." Dinah didn't turn. She looked at Titan, who turned his head to meet her gaze. In that silent exchange, the dog didn't whine or move to attack. He simply lowered his head in a bow of absolute devotion. He knew. "I'm not giving it to the machine, Cale," Dinah said, her voice amplified by the array's own resonance. "I'm giving it back to the world." The worst scenario Dinah had feared wasn't the raiders or the monsters. It was the moment she had to let go of her guardians to save the people who tried to kill them. She slammed her other hand onto the secondary terminal. The sound was like a thunderclap that never ended. A pillar of pure blue light shot upward from the array, piercing the dark fungal clouds and punching a hole straight through to the stratosphere. The energy didn't come from a battery or a fuel cell. It was being drawn directly from Dinah's marrow. The sapphire mist began to pour from the array's massive dishes, rolling over the edges of the tower like a waterfall. As it hit the atmosphere, it bonded with the spores, turning the toxic white haze into harmless, shimmering dust. Cale dropped his weapon, falling to his knees as the pressure in his suit stabilized. He reached out a gloved hand as the air around him turned crisp, clean, and sweet for the first time in his adult life. He pulled off his cracked mask, gasping, his lungs filling with air that didn't taste like death. On the platform, the glow beneath Dinah's skin began to fade. The blue light in the dog's collars flickered once, twice, and then went dark. The mechanical hum of the harnesses died. Titan slumped to the ground, no longer a high-tech guardian, just a tired, brave dog in the cold. Dinah fell beside him, her pink coat gray with ash, her strength spent. The great silence was over, replaced by the sound of a world finally breathing again. The blue pillar of light gradually softened into a shimmering auroral curtain, draping the sky in hues of violet and gold. For the first time in a decade, the suffocating ceiling of the pale rot had been torn open. High atop the siren array, the wind began to die down, shifting from a toxic howl to a gentle, clean breeze that carried the scent of rain and ozone. Dinah lay on the cold metal grating, her breath coming in slow, shallow hitches. The sapphire glow that had pulsed through her veins was gone, leaving her feeling hollow and light, as if the very essence of her weight had been broadcast into the atmosphere. Beside her, Titan gave a low, weary huff. He rested his heavy head on her shoulder, his amber eyes dimming as the mechanical assistance of his harness powered down for the final time. Below, the sounds of conflict had vanished. The members of the Iron Lung Brigade had emerged from the stairwells, but they weren't charging with weapons drawn. They stood on the lower observation decks, their heavy, rusted helmets clattering to the floor. Men who had spent years squinting through cracked visors now looked up at the sky with tear-streaked faces, watching as the sun, a pale lemon-colored disk, finally broke through the thinning haze. Cale walked toward Dinah with hesitant steps. He no longer looked like a mechanical monster. Without his mask, he was just a man, aged prematurely by fear and poison. He looked at the girl in the shredded pink coat and then at the dog. He didn't reach for the keys or the blood anymore. Instead, he took off his own tattered cloak and gently draped it over Dinah's shivering frame. "It's over," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The sensors. The scouts are reporting the blue mist is hitting the suburbs. The spores are just turning to dust." Dinah didn't speak. She didn't have the strength to tell him about the labs, the years of isolation, or the father who had turned his love for his daughter into a map for the world's salvation. She simply reached out and buried her fingers in Titan's fur. The other dogs, Rex, Ghost, Baron, Sarge, and Jinx, began to emerge from the stairwell, limping and exhausted, but alive. They gathered around her, forming one last circle. This time, they weren't protecting her from a poison. They were simply keeping her warm. As the first true sunset began to paint the Chicago skyline in shades of fire and copper, Dinah Miller finally closed her eyes. She wasn't an airwalker or a cure vessel anymore. She was just a girl, falling asleep in the middle of a world that was learning how to breathe again. The long walk was over. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.